Okay, friends, today we are continuing this chapter on religion, and this has come to a very important. I did cover most of the other religions. We covered Buddhism, Zoroastrians, we covered the ancient Sumerians, Mesopotamian history, and we covered that. But here we are going to now today cover the part which relates to India and the ancient religions in India. We have all heard about the Vedic religion, what do you call Hinduism, but believe me, the word Hinduism comes very late. The word Hinduism is given by the Mughals, basically. But before that, we have it's called the ancient Vedic or the Prakrit. Prakrit, the word comes from Buddhism, and India is a very interesting it's an amalgamation of a lot of people from throughout the world, and that migration is today what we have India. That's why you see we have a vast culture, we have different type of peoples, and there's a long history of migration into India, and that's what I wanted to cover here of the origins of what you call the Vedic religion. I'm not covering Hinduism today, but it is related to Vedic religion, and there is a difference between Vedic and Hinduism, basically. Today, if you want to search for Vedic history, you will not find the Vedic history in India. The Vedic history is all in Mesopotamia and in Syria, basically. And you'll be surprised to know that when I go through this as to what it is. And I have to cover some of the early Greek history for you to understand what is the Vedic history. So from here, I've just got a picture of the Tower of Babel. Most of you know this. It's in the Bible, but we can't prove it today. In Iraq, they have found a mold like this, but there's no hard proof of it. But we as Christians in the Bible, we believe that there was a Tower of Babel, and it was supposed to be have been built by Nimrod. And this is where God confuses the people because of the arrogance, and he creates different languages and confusions. And this is the time, basically, in the time of Peleg. Peleg was one of the descendants of Adam, and people basically spread across. Once they couldn't understand each other's language, they started spreading and moving across and forming new communities and new countries, basically. Oh, here I just start with they said we were once all in one family until the language split at Babel. We all worship the same God, the God of Noah. After the big dispersion, the families migrated across the globe. Other ancient religions, as we know them, started to evolve in all ancient cultures. But they all took the memory of the one God of Noah, basically at that time, and everyone moved across with that one story of the true God, basically. Uh, I've discovered that in many ancient cultures, we do worship a God similar to Yahweh of the Bible, like the Chinese, the ancient Chinese, and I have a separate presentation on this Chinese. They call the ancient god of the Bible as Shangdi, and that's the reason you have Shanghai too there. The Shanghai, the word Shanghai comes from the god Shangdi, and that's the earliest figure of religious worship in China. And the grandson of Noah, who was called Sin, basically, he was the father of China, basically. And that's why they call it the Shino. We use the term Shino everywhere, the Indo-Sino Treaty and all that. The word Sino comes from sin. And here I just writing a short description about Shangdi, like the Abrahamic god wasn't worshipped with any images. The Chinese never had any image for Shangdi. Today, if you go to China, in the capital city, you will see there is a temple there, and there is nothing in the temple. There is no statues, nothing. There is only candles burning there, and that's the god they worship in the today. That worship is not there. China is mostly atheist. They have they follow other religions too, Buddhism, and then they have some other religions too. Here I quote the book of Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper was a very famous writer who wrote about uh, the nations which Noah's sons had formed. It's a very interesting book. Here he compares and he writes that Japheth is basically the Prajapati of India. If you look on the right side, I gave a screenshot of it, and very clearly he says that Prajapati is basically, see there, Prajapati in India, Lapidus in Greece, and Jupiter in Rome is the same person as Japati. They call him Yapet also. And basically, the three sons moved in onto the Indian continent. Now, Yapet was given the northern side, that is Russia. His sons actually formed Moscow. It's after one of his sons, and they formed the Kuru tribes. And the sons of Shem who come in from the Afghanistan side, they form the Kuru tribes, which I talked in one of my previous presentation, the Kauravas and the Pauravas and the Kauravas, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So that I had covered in my previous presentation. Now here I just want to just give a brief description so that you understand what is the influence on Indian culture and how it all came. The Greek gods were basically the sons of Noah, and they basically all fought with each other. And those are the stories of Homer and Iliad and all the Odyssey. How it's called the Clash of the Titans. Basically, they are all Greek story, but some things are mythology. But they basically come from the sons of Noah. Like here, I write very clearly that Ham was Hyperion. He was called the Titan of the sun and of the south. Now, Ham was given the southern part of the world, what is called today Africa. Ham's son is Cush, and Canaan was on the left side. He takes over the Jordan area and the Israel area, whereas Cush takes over Africa. And now today we'll deal mostly with Cush. Shem is known as Kronos. Kronos was also known for a name for Noah, but they always mixed it in Greek mythology, but it's considered sometimes as Kronos is Noah. Shem is also known as Kronos. Japheth was Lepidus. He was also known as Jupiter in Greek. And they were always shown with certain instruments in the hand, like the Vajra, that is the lightning rod. They were worshipped as different gods, like the god of wind and all that. Here I just give a small description of the Greek gods. The three brothers, the Titan pillars, they were called Lepidus, Hyperion, and Creus. Here I just say that Shem, what he was, and this I'm not going through everything. This, if anyone needs, they can read it. But this is what I have put from a presentation. Like I said, he was known as Hyperion, was the Titan god of the heavenly lights and the east. Now Shem was the most holy among all the sons of Noah. He was the only one who worshipped the god of Noah. Japheth was, like I said, he was given the north side of the earth, and his children, like Gomer, his son was Gomer. He forms Germany, and like I said, Ham moves on to Africa. Here I just give a brief of Ham and Cush. Yeah, this is just a write up on all the gods, how they were defined in various parts of Egypt and Syria and all that. Basically, they were taking the sons of Noah and they were making them gods. Like I said in one of my previous presentation too, that the Egyptian god with the 11 gods, which start from Atum, was actually Adam. They take the first 11 from Adam to Ham, and those were the final gods in Egypt, basically. Here I just cover the 12 children of Zeus. We don't have to go through all of it. There is Athena, Apollo, Hermes. Now, these are all the gods which the Greeks worshipped. You have Poseidon, the god of the sea, Hera, Hestia. Now, we have to know certain one of them because some of them was also worshipped in India. And I will get to that. And like Dionysus, you can, the god of wine, we got to just remember him, and Heracles. Heracles was also called Hercules. The earliest migration into the land we call India today has taken place multiple times and at different locations. The whole of India was a phased migration from time to time. There were two types of migration, the northern migration and the southern migration. Both are from west to east. Today, some folks during they have on the internet they say that Indian culture went to the west, and the west copied all Indian gods. That is all not true. Basically, everything that came from the west to the east. Migration came, information came, trade came from west to east. Of course, we traded with them, but when it came to religion and all the information, it came from west to east. Nothing went from east to west, except for Buddhism. Buddhism is the only religion which passed from India to other countries, and we did cover that. The earliest migration was from the southern side, what we call the Dravidian belt. All the Dravidians are basically descendants from African Sudan and Namibia. I don't know if you have seen the BBC documentary. It was a 3-hour documentary on India, the story of India. It was clearly mentioned there that the genes, when they were checked, very matches most of the genes of the people in Tamil Nadu. The whole of southern India was called uh, uh, Tamil Nadu. It was not called Tamil Nadu in the starting. It was called Kumarakondam. And Kerala and all was formed very late in the 50s. And even all that Karnataka and all that, those states were not there. They were all called the Southern Kingdom of South, which is the land of Tamil. And basically, we are all descendants from the Africans into India. Those were the original Dravidians, and that's the reason our color is very dark. And we have the traits, and basically, they are all descendants of Ham and Cush. Cush formed Ethiopia, and basically, that's the land from where he ruled. And then he goes on to Mesopotamia and he forms a kingdom called Kish. If you go to the British Museum today, there is the King's List, Sumerian King's List. And very clearly it mentions in that after the flood, the first kingdom was the land of Kish. Kish was none other than Kush. Now, Kush's influence in India is a lot. Many people ignore it, that a lot of names today come from Kush. And I will cover that as to how basically the religions are influenced. Now, when I am making a one-to-one comparison, please do not take it that those people are really Cush's descendants. Most of the gods, whether they invented it or it was an inspiration, most of them are inspiration from other gods. Were basically stories created on these descendants. That means it is not necessary that Kush's direct descendants were there. There are stories also built on Kush. The northern migration was through Afghanistan, the Baltic, and the Bactria region. Today, the Bactria is some parts of Afghanistan and Turkmenistan. Basically, that's called the Bactria region. And that is where in the ending Ham escapes from India. He comes from Africa into India and then escapes to Bactria. And he was killed by Shem in Bactria, that area. And some scholars say that Shem was also the Zarathustra, I think. Zarathustra is the founder of the Zoroastrian. They say he was Zarathustra, but I don't believe that. For example, the seals in the Indus Valley do show signs of the Sumerians, and this I'll show you the connection between Indus Valley and the Sumerian culture. One of the seal, many of you might have seen, is a man fighting two tigers. Basically, that is the same seal which the Sumerians had, where Gilgamesh is fighting two bulls. In the Sumerian culture, the bull was very important, but when it was copied in the Indus Valley, tigers were in plenty in India, so they removed the bull and they put the tigers. So you see the seal of two tigers, a man fighting, but it was nothing but the story of Gilgamesh there. And I'll show you the picture on the next slide. And at that time, the Sumerians did recognize Indus Valley as Meluha and Dilmun in their stone tablets. Meluha was basically the Indus Valley area. The whole Harappa civilization area was called Meluha. And Dilmun is the port of Bahrain today. That's called Dilmun. And that is where the Bible says the Garden of Eden was. And here I have a small slide created of how Kush's memory is still in India. The Hindu Kush mountains, we all know, we still call it the Hindu Kush mountains. Kush was the son of Ham. And the followers of Kush were known as Kishites with the K. Like I told, he had made a city called Kish in Mesopotamia. His followers were called as Kishites, and in India they were called as the Kashtriyas. You might have heard the different Brahmins, Kashtriyas, and the Shudras and all that. So Kashtriyas were fighters, basically they were warriors. But they were followers of Kush. In Kush's name, it was called Kashtriyas, basically. You have the northern side, the Kashmir. Kashmir was also in memory of Kush. The real meaning of Kashmir is Kushmir. That means the lake of Kush. It was later on created as Kashmir. The word K is the English alphabet, but in ancient time it was Kashmir, the lake of Kush. So Kush forms a great influence in Indian, knowingly, unknowingly. He is there in our history, basically. If you look later on, and when I come to the Ramayana, the children of Kush, the children of Rama, they were called as Love and Kush, his two sons. That's where the memory also lies. And there are some more things too. Here I was just showing you the seals which are found in Indus Valley civilization as well as in Sumerian. Here you see here the first. Can you see my mouse moving on the left side? This is the Sumerian letter which says Meluha. And to the right of that, there's a master of elements and the bullman fighting beast. The left one is basically the Sumerian artifact. Basically, it's of Gilgamesh fighting the two bulls. And on the right side, that is the famous Indus Valley civilization seal, the man fighting two tigers. Now, this is very similar. This shows the real connection with the Sumerian. That means there's a migration of Sumerian people into the continent of India happened at that time. And they were basically, Sumerians itself. Then later on, because this is a big debate going on as to whether they were originally, Indus Valley people were originally Indians or not. But very frankly, they were Sumerians. You see another disc below, that is Enkidu, that is their god, which is in the Gilgamesh, Enkidu fighting the lion. The same one on the right, you can see there the man with horns, hoofs, and tails fighting a beast. This is from the Indus Valley civilization. And on the right side, I show a clipping from, and the Indians very cleverly, they say it's the Pashupati seal, where at this I explained it last time, the man sitting in a meditating position, and he has all animals around him. The Indians say this is Shiva, but many world historians say this is not Shiva. This may be a man who loved nature and was connected to nature, and most probably it is Noah, because Noah was depicted with animals and with three faces. Here, just I have used AI to create some of the images on the left. That is Indus Valley seal, master of tigers, and the Mesopotamian cylinder Gilgamesh, also master of animals. Here I am showing the seal basically of Meluha. It is written on the right on the Sumerian inscription. The Akkadian Empire cylinder seal. It was a cylinder basically. The seal is lying in the British Museum. No, it's in the Louvre Museum in France. This seal. This is where the word Melua comes from, and that definitely is the Indus Valley. Here I made a small chart as to the migration into Asian India. You have the first migration, like I said, Sumeria to Meluha, that the Sumerians who came on the northern side. Then you have the East African to South India. That is the Ham's children who came in, and at that Ashoka's time it was called Jambudipa. In the Bible, it calls it Hud. There was no country at that time. So when the folks were writing the Bible, anything across Ethiopia was called the land of Hud. They didn't know what lands existed those days. It was all empty. So it was called the land of Hud. Ophir was one of the grandsons of Noah. It was also called the land of Ophir, the land of gold, because it's mentioned in the book of Solomon that they get all their gold from the land of Ophir. And during Ashoka's time, it was called Jambudipa. And Africa during that time was called Kushpadipa. That means the land of Kushpadipa it is called. And then you have the Central Asian Huns invading India from the north, from Bactria, from Russia, and all that stuff. And that's just in short the migration into India. Here, I want to get into the history of the Brahmins, basically, and I quote a book written by Jyotiba Phule. I hope everyone has heard Jyotiba Phule. He was with Ambedkar. And he wrote a very interesting book. You can get it on the internet to read it. It's called Gulamgiri. In English, it's called slavery. And here he mentions how the early Brahmins arrived into India and who they were, basically, who we identify as Aryans. Remember, the word Aryans is actually not starting with A. I did mention it last time too. It is Aryan because the land of Iran was known as Iran Aryans. That means who come from Iran. Later on, the British made it Aryans. They added an A instead of an E-I. Here, very clearly, he mentions how the Brahmanic priest came into India and how they basically changed the whole concept here and created a new religion, basically, and who were their gods. Phule argues that these names originally referred not to divine incarnations like the Matsya and Kurma. Now, some of you may not know what are the avatars of Hinduism, but there are some 7 or 8 avatars which I'll cover ahead. I'm not going to go in brief, in just a summary, and how those names got the names. Matsya means a fish, and you'll get that when I show you the picture. Phule argues that these names originally referred not to divine incarnation, but to the type of boats or vessels used by foreign invaders to reach India. According to his interpretations, the Brahmins, the Aryans, ancestors arrived by sea from the region of Iran or nearby lands, conquered the indigenous inhabitants, and later transferred memory of these events into religious myths. In the introduction to Gulamgiri, this book, Gulamgiri, it is written in such a way that it's a dialogue between Jyotiba Phule and a person called Dondiba. Dondiba is asking the questions and Jyotiba Phule is answering his questions. Basically, it's a question and answer in this book, basically. And here Dondiba is asking him, how many hordes of Aryans may have come to India before the time of the Vamanas? The Vamanas means they are the Greeks. Jyotiba Phule says many hordes of Aryans came to India in ship by the sea. Dondiba asked, did the first horde come in warships? Jyotiba says there were no warships at that time. They came in small boats, canoes. These canoes moved swiftly over the sea like fish. That is why the captain of the crew may have come to be called as Matsya. Now we'll come to know what is Matsya later on in the Hindu philosophy. Then Donduba asked him, then how many Brahmin historians written in their book, like the Bhagavata, that the said captain was born of a fish? Jyotiba Phule says, a little reflection will convince you, however, a different man and fish are in different physical structures of food, sleep, and proclamation. Basically, he's trying to say that basically the Hinduism, when it says that their gods came from these avatars, basically the real story is very different. The first group of people who came in by the ships, they basically came in a very small boat. Like I said, those boats were called Matsyas because it was a fisherman's boat. And that's why the first group of people who landed in India were called the Matsyas. Before I get into that, I want to show a small slide as to why and how many times did the migrations happen and why did the Jews had to escape. The migration of ancient Jews to India after the destruction of the first temple. Remember, this is the time of Solomon. Solomon builds the first temple, and it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar the two in 586 BCE, and that's the time the Ark of the Covenant disappears. Till the time Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple, there were records of the Ark of the Covenant, and it just disappears after that. We don't. There's a written history of the Ark of the Covenant after the destruction of the first temple. It is at this time that many Jews basically escape from Judah, and this is the route which they take. They come via Persia, and then via sea they come into Cochin. This is the first set of Jews who came to India. And that's the reason you have the Cochin Jews in Malabar. They were the first set of Jews who came to India. Then you have the second temple. It was built by Herod, and it was destroyed in around 70 CE, about 70 years before Christ. And at this time, there were the next set of Jews who came in. And this is probably the time, the set of Jews who came here, they were what we call the Saracen Jews. Now, I don't have to get into very deep. The Jews also had many classes. They were very, what do you call, hardcore Jews. There were some Jews who did not follow the Torah, so they were called as Saracen Jews. There were some Jews who did not follow Judaism, but they were from the clan. And that you'll understand when I show you the chart ahead. Basically, they escaped from Jerusalem. Some went to Europe, some went to Asia, some to Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia. Some came to India, and these are the ones who came in the small boats, basically, on the coast, on the west coast of India. Basically. And here I come to the Dondiba story. Here I show you how the first set of people come in these small boats. They were called Matsyas. And if you see the Hindu calendar, this is the avatars of Hindus. You have the 5 top ones and the 5 bitter ones. The 5 top ones are basically the avatars named after the migration of Brahmins. The last 5 are basically created later on as as incarnations of Vishnu. They say all are incarnation of Vishnu, but the last 5 were created very later on. But the first 5 relates to the story of the migration: the Matsya, the Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha, and Vaman. Now, I will give you a short explanation as to why these guys got the name. I did explain as to why they got the first name of Matsya. These were the first sets of people who come in. Here he writes, where did the captain of Matsya hold land along with his crew? Jyotiba says he came to India across the western Arabian Sea and disembarked at the port of the western coast. What did he do on embarking? He killed the chieftain Satrap Shankusar by name. This is mentioned by Jyotiba. It was under the control of the Aryans until the death of the Matsyan captain. When Matsya died, the followers of Shankura launched a terrific attack on the Matsya hordes. The Matsya hordes were vanquished and took to their heels. Then they hid themselves in the thick of the mountainside to save themselves from the pursuing victorious followers of Shankasur. Just then, an Aryan horde from Iran came in boats over the Western Sea and landed at the said port. That means the second set of people. These boats were called the Kachawas, were slightly bigger than the canoes, and hence used to move over the water like tortoise. Hence, the captain of the horde was nicknamed of us as Kachas. But the Kachas were also called as Kurma. This is the second set of migration of the people, Aryans coming in from the Brahmins. A careful consideration revealed to us that there are some point of differences between the fish and the tortoise, but there are many similarities between them regarding their aquatic nature. So it is written in the books like the Bhagavata that Kacha was born of a tortoise. You see, in Hinduism, they say that the Kacha, sometimes some things in their books don't make sense. You know, they say it was the Kachas were born from a tortoise, but the real story is the Kacha was nothing but a name given to the boat, which they came in and arrived at that time. I hope you're getting the connection here. So I'm just trying to make the connection of how these names basically they derived and they created a story. Now you see the Varaha is basically a man with a pig head. Now this was not a real, this is only an image created because one of I'll read it, then you'll understand. Where did the Kastrias driven by the Kachas go? Now remember, Dondibai is saying, where did the Kastrias? Kastrias, remember, they are the people of Kush. They were there at the time when these invaders came. They were terrified by the news of the arrival of the second horde of Aryans from Iran, hence shouting, the Devas have come, the Devas have come. They've come, crossed the mountains and followed the chieftain Kashyap. Kash up is Kush. The Kachas descended the mountain with a small army with them. He thus left the mountains and continued to harass the Kastriyas in the Kashat kingdom. Who succeeded Varaha as the chief of the Devas? Jyotiba says Narasimha. Narasimha, he was called the next chieftain in the new Aryan group was called Narasimha because he was a very violent person. And he avenges the death of his father. His father was also very, like a very tyrant king, and that's the reason they compared him to the pig. And that's the reason the avatar Varaha is shown as a pig. And that is very clearly shown here. He writes it. The Kastriyas began to call Narasimha as Narasimha, a lioness, a pejorative term. Later, some sons of Hishaku tried hard to avenge the murder of their father by Narasimha. But despairing to secure his kingdom, he breathed his last heartbroken. So basically, I'm not going through the whole thing, but basically all these images are tied to the real story of how at the time of migration, the stories were spun around those chieftains and images were created. And I will show you later on this Narasimha. Where does this image come from? It's very interesting. Here in the last, he says, therefore, organize a huge army and approach the borders of Bali kingdom with the intention of conquering it for himself. Vamana was very greedy of enterprising and hot of temper. Now here I show you the picture of all the avatars. In Hinduism, it is there even today. They say Vishnu took all these avatars and Kalki is the going to what you call in future, like how we have the revelation. Kalki is the last who will come in the Kali Yuga. Now, this is an interesting part. During the 10th, 11th century, when Hinduism was forming and they were trying to drive out all the Buddhas and Jains, like I said in my previous presentation, at that time they wanted to, the Vishnuites and the Shivites wanted to know how to get rid of the stories that Buddha was the original God. So they came up with a clever idea. They said that Buddha was actually a Hindu god, but he was an incarnation of Vishnu. They made him an incarnation of Vishnu and they put him into the avatars. And that's how Buddha is also shown as in the avatar. Here I have an artistic map of how the migration took place into India. Prajapati comes in here. The descendants of Japheth, and below I show you the descendants of Shem, how they come in. Here you have Ham. Basically, he forms the city of Axum. Axum is in Ethiopia, and then Kush moves on to also create a kingdom in near Shinar, which is called Kish, and then he moves into India, basically. Ham's expansion into India. Yeah, this is just a presentation of how I have created my migrations in two phases, one from the northern side and one the southern migration via ship, basically. And this is basically a stone tablet which also gives you the migration patterns of how during the Sumerian times they had a map of India. This is very interestingly the olden map of how the Indus River flowed and all that. This is an article from the Queen's University of Belfast. I thought I'll just include it so that it gives a little authentication and so that you believe that I'm not telling fairy tales. There was a DNA test done on all the Indians, basically, the southern Indians. The research, you can search it on the internet. It's called the Human Evolution, the Formation of Human Population in South and Central Asia. This document explores why there is no single Indian DNA. That means they come to the conclusion that all the DNA in India basically all ties down to Yamanaya. That means the central part of Europe. This is where Urata is. Urata is Arata, where the Noah's Ark is landed. Basically, humanity spread from here. You see, 3300 BC, everyone moves into the northern part, then moves in through Afghanistan into India. Around 1000 BC, 1500 BC, they come into India. It's written in ancient North Indians is 2000 to 1000 BC. If anyone wants to really read this report, it's a very interesting report, and you get it on the internet. Just search it by this title. It's from the Queen's University, Belfast. Here, I just want to cover this. I have covered this in my previous, the earliest mentions of invasion of India by boats and ship. The first written ones were of basically written by Greeks. One of the old Greek writer called Setius, he writes it in about 500 or 600 BC. Setius also writes a lot about Alexander, and he writes about the invasion of India and what the Indus Valley. He writes about Semiramis. Most of you who have seen my presentation on Nimrod know who's Semiramis. This is basically, and Semiramis is always shown riding a tiger. This concept was also copied in India. They have many as Durga and all riding a tiger. This basically the concept is from Semiramis. Here I show the basically a sort of picture of Semiramis entering India, which is modern day Pakistan. When we say India, it's on the northern side. And Barossus, another writer, also mentions how Semiramis basically goes into war with a king called Stratobertus. The Indian word is Supratika, but Indian history doesn't have this king's name, basically. Now, coming to our Bible, there is in our Bible, God promises to Abraham that he will make Abraham the father of many nations. God says, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. Genesis 17:4. And indeed, God made Abraham the father of many nations. And you will see that. Many of the religions today throughout the world, directly, indirectly, knowingly, unknowingly, basically have their connection to Abraham. And that is what I wanted to prove to you in this presentation as to how the early religion of Vedic religion ties down to Abraham. Now, here I'm covering some similarities between the Jews and the Brahmins. Basically, the modern history of Jews begins with their first patriarch, Abraham, who was married to Sarai. Now, Sarai was also known as Sarah. God changes her name from Sarai to Sarah. The Jews were conquered by the Assyrians in 732 BC. That is the destruction of the temple of the first time. 10 of the 12 tribes were taken captive and exiled to Babylon. The said tribes disappeared from the face of history and are known in Jewish lore as the lost tribes. There was, however, been a considerable period from colonial times a theory that the Brahmins in India are the descendants of at least some of the lost tribes. There appears to be a mounting and impressive evidence in support of this thesis. Let's have a look. The lost tribes would have traveled around thousands of miles to reach India from Palestine, which would take several centuries considering the mode of travel in those earlier times. Over this considerable distance and a time, one can easily see Abraham mutating to Brahma and to Sarai to Saraswati. We all know that the Hindu god Brahma is married to Saraswati. Brahma marries Saraswati, his daughter. In Hindu religion, Saraswati is Brahma's daughter. And that's sometimes many people have debates on it as to why Brahma marries his daughter. But basically, it's the same principle of Abraham marrying his cousin sister Sarai. Sarah is his cousin. Abraham marries Sarah. The birth of Saraswati is attributed to Brahma going into meditation and splitting into male and female form. Now, these are all different stories that the Hindus have created how uh, Saraswati was born, basically. Abraham is noted that he has married his half sister Sarai. For the Hindus, the demon or the anti god is known as Asuras. Now, why do the Hindus call them Asuras? The Asuras are shown as a harmful person out to destroy the Hindus and to be avoided. This dislike of the Asuras could be the natural deviation of the fact that the lost tribes of the Jews were captured and exiled by the Assyrians. It is not possible that the Asuras are the same as the Assyrians who have enslaved the lost tribes. Now you get the difference as to where the word Asura comes from. It comes from the Assyrians, who they had a huge hatred towards the Assyrians. So they always called them the bad demons, basically. The biblical account of the flood, God gives instruction to Noah to build a waterproof vessel along with a sample of life. This vessel is an ark of gopher wood, because everyone knows which the art was so and so, and would survive the flood and would come on the rest of the mountain of Ararat. The Hindu account says it was then that he, Lord Matsya, now you got the word Matsya, we all know from where the word Matsya comes from, revealed himself, informed the king of all destruction, deluge, which would be coming very soon. The king built a huge boat which housed his family and so and so, and the deluge would end the oceans and the sea would recede. At the time of the deluge, Vishnu appeared as a horned fish and Shesha appeared as a rope with which Manu fastened the boat to horn of the fish. His boat was perched after the deluge on the top of the Malaya mountains. Now, don't you see the similarity here? Noah's boat also come on the mountains of Ararat. Basically, what they're doing is a cut copy of everything. His boat was perched after the deluge on the top of the Malaya mountains. It is difficult to believe that the biblical and the Puranic floods are the same events and the Noah and Manu are the same person. The Jews are a community that are scattered around the world. One thing that stands out to them is that no matter what the circumstances, the Jews always proposed and thrives, which is disliked by native communities. Consequently, the Jews had come to be hated throughout the history and blamed for various ills. And basically, the same thing happened in respect of Brahmins in India who attracted the same sort of public distaste and for the same reason. Here you see there are some comparisons we are doing. The Jews are described as the people of God. You know, Jews always say we are the chosen people of God. It's the same thing what the Brahmin says, that they are the chosen people of God. Now, they have confused something from the Torah because basically, like I said, they were Saracen Jews. And if you know, in the olden times, you did not have access to the holy books. It was very hard till the 16th century to even read a Bible. Your head would get cut if you went to read a Bible because people who printed the Bible would be killed by the church. So it was very hard, and Jews never shared their books. The Brahmins also never shared their books. That's the reason the Brahmins never allowed the Shudras to learn and read the books. If you read the Vedas, it is written in the Manusmriti. If you read the Vedas, you should put molten mercury in the Shudras' ears. This is there in the Manusmriti. So they never allowed because they did not want the real information to go out to the common man. Now you see the similarities. The devotion of Hindu to the cow. However, what is not well known of the worship of the cow is not known. But if you see the story of Exodus, when Moses is there in the wilderness, they basically, when Moses delays coming down from the mountains, Aaron and the tribe basically build a golden calf and they start worshipping the calf. Basically, the worshipping of the calf comes from very ancient Jews, as the time of Asherah and Baal. I don't know if many of you know who's the Baal god. It was a child worship god. Basically, Baal is the same god who later on becomes Hubal, the Baal. Hubal becomes Allah, basically. And we'll go to that later on when we come to Islam. The devotion, after seeking advice, the king made two golden calves. He said to the people, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. How are your gods, Israel, who brought you up to Egypt? One he sent to Bethel and one into Dan. This basically is talking of what I said about Moses. The the other study of the common links between Jews and Wales was made by Professor Madan Mohan Shukla. He has written a book and published in the journal 1976. There are biblical references indicated to the Jewish people, generally the Gentiles, as strangers. They are very proud of themselves and their custom and looks down Gentiles. Basically, the Jews had this habit of considering them the most chosen people of God. And they did not have a caste system, but they did divide people into groups. And I will show you in the next slide how they have done it. Like I said before, the Vedic history, if you want to search the proof of Vedic, it is not found in India. It's in modern day Syria and Mesopotamia. All the gods which they worship today, Indara, which they call Indra, basically it's a Mitanni god. You have Mitra, a Mitanni god, which is Syrian god. So there are a lot of connections. All the proof lies in Syria and not in India. This is a very interesting slide which I want you to just go through very quickly. The word Brahma, from where does it come? The creator god. Brahm in Sanskrit means imagination. This is a very famous word which is written in a very famous book called Brahmanism. Brahmanism developed as a matter of fact a view of history that has placed for little or no change. Sometimes it literally maintains that the world has always been as it is now. Sometimes under the influence of clinical cyclical vision of history borrowed from the greater Magadha. This is written by Jonas Brockers in the University of Lausanne. This is what I wanted to explain to you. The ancient Hebrew and many languages, it's not only Hebrew, Sanskrit, Hebrew, ancient Aramaic, ancient Arabic, did not have vowels. Vowels is a new concept. Giving sound to words is a new concept. Previously, the earliest writings were basically pictorial. They wrote with root alphabets. Basically, they did not write sound alphabets. That means you did not have the vowels called A, E, I, O, U. That is the English vowels were not there. So if you take the vowels out of the original Hebrew word, Abraham, the meaning of Abraham is Ab-Ram. Now, many of you may not know that the word Ram is not an Indian word. Even Rama is not an Indian word. The word Ram means exalted. And the Egyptians used the word Ram as Ra. Ra was their god. That's why you have Ramesses, Rama. Rama was also the grandson of Cush. So here I am explaining, if you take out the alphabet from the Brahman word, you are left with Brahm, B-R-H-M-N, okay? And you take out the letter from Abraham and you have Brahm. Basically, this is in Hebrew written. Brahm is imagination. Basically, it's the in Hebrew language, the written vowels, which we call Nikud, is not there in the olden times. And that's why they call it Aleph Bet and Resh Mem. Aleph Bet is the Hebrew word. And you get the word alphabet from the Hebrew word Aleph Bet, basically. And so you get with the root word Brahm, B-R-M, which is at the bottom, Brahm. In ancient Hebrew, like I said, there was no vowels. We used this. And the ancient Aryans who came to India, basically, they wrote everything about the Jewish God as, they considered Abraham as their God and not the God of Noah. So Abraham was made into a god, and that is the initial root of the word Brahma, basically. And if you look, many things in Hinduism by ancient Brahmins basically are taken from Jewish characters. Now, when we say Rishi Muni, it comes from the Hebrew word Rishonim. That means a Jewish scholar and commentator. The word sages is also not an Indian word. It comes from Sumerian, and it comes from also Hebrew. It says the wise person is known as the sages. There were 7 sages. Now you understand why they take a 7 chakra around the fire. The 7 number is very important to Hinduism, but it's all taken from Sumerians. The Sumerians have the 7 wise people, and that's why you have the 7 people sitting in the boat, in Manu's boat. You don't have a woman sitting in the boat. 8 people in the boat were in Noah's. From that, 4 were men and 4 were women. But in the Hindu manuscripts, you have 7 sages plus 1 person sitting who is Manu. That is 8. But they count as the 7 sages, significantly influenced later Mesopotamian cultures such as the Akkadian and the Babylon, who incorporated these figures into their own mythology. Now, coming to the stories which are used in Hindu mythologies, I'll give you just a brief. I can't go to everything, but from where they have come. The story of Judah. If you have read the Bible, you must have heard the story of Judah and Tamara. How Judah gets his Tamara married to one of his sons, and then his son dies. Then he makes her marry the second son. He dies. He makes her marry the third son. Basically, Judah gets Tamar married to all his sons, and later on he wants to sleep with Tamar. This horrible story is there in the Bible. If you see it in the Old Testament, this is the story which was their inspiration for in their Mahabharata, where Kaushali, I think, I'm not getting her name, she marries the 5 brothers, the Pandava brothers. Yeah, Pandava brothers, she married. This is basically inspiration from the story of Judah. Then the ritual of the priestly caste wearing sackcloth, so all are the same in the eyes of God. Even the Brahmins, whenever they do worship, they will put a very simple cloth. This was basically the practice of the Jews. If you went in front of the tabernacle, you had to wear a very simple priestly cloth, sack. Basically, it was a sackcloth, so that you emphasize that everyone, rich, poor, king, or a common man, is equal in the eyes of God. That was the purpose of wearing a sackcloth. Today, even the Muslims do it when they go around the Kaaba, but that's all come from this ritual from the Jews. The formation of different castes and skills. Jews also had people for different things. They had a priestly class just for prayers. Then you had the working class. Then you had people looking after animals, people who are fighters, who only fought. This same thing was picked up by the early Jewish Aryans, and they simply copied it into the Indian culture, and they made it into caste system. I want to give you an example. Megasthenes was in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. He was an ambassador from Greece in the 1st century. He was in the 1st century BC, 2nd century BC. And he writes in his book Indica that when he came to India and was in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, he did not see any casteism in India. At that time, it was only Buddhism. And I covered this in my Buddhism story. So there was no caste. This caste system came only after the arrival of the first set of Aryans, who later on became the Brahmins. Basically, even the Buddhists had 2 sects of people called Brahman and Shamans. If people remember the presentation, the Shaman was the priestly type, and the Brahmans were on the ritual side, basically. The ancient Jews always feared the ocean because, as per the Old Testament, God punishes Satan and puts them in the abyss of the sea. If you have read the Old Testament, God punishes Satan and his followers and punishes them in the abyss of the sea. That's why the Jews always feared the ocean. The same thing is with Brahmins. Brahmins always did not do sea travel. That's the reason when Mahatma Gandhi went to UK to study. And when he came back, the Brahmins took a whole, what do you call, a julus outside to basically, go against why Gandhiji broke the laws of Hinduism of traveling by sea. At that time, they were so rigid in their mind that they followed the same principle of the Jews, that sea worship. Even today, today it is a modern day, but till the early 19th century, Christians and Brahmins never bought property at the sea. It was only fishermen and low class people who lived near the sea. They never purchased land at the sea. Even today, if you go to the south, all the sea property used to be by the fishermen and poor people. Rich people never stayed near the sea because of this concept that the sea is punished by Satan. Now, the other similarity is the hair loss, and I'll show you in my slide. You see, the Jews used to keep the hair in the center of the head in respect to God. Thou shalt not show your head. That's why they put a skull cap too, and they used to grow their hair at the side. Now, the Jews never grew this hair lock at the center. They always grew it at the temple side. If you see the picture, I'll show you. And that thing was copied by the Brahmins. They knew about it when they came. They took that concept and they had what you call the chutti today, the hair with the tie, the priest class. And here, like I said, Abraham and his wife Sarah, in the Brahmanism, it was called Brahma and Saraswati. Saravati means wife. Sarah is Sarah's name. So the word Saraswati is Sarah, basically. And remember, Abraham takes his maid has a second wife. Her name was Hagar. And Hagar's son was Ishmael. Now, in India, we have a river which is a tributary of Saraswati, which is called the Ganga River. If you Google it, you'll get the Ganga River, which is a tributary of Saraswati. They even named that after Ganga, that is Hagar. You have the Vedas where it says there is one God and no images of the Veda. Sometimes Hindus always proudly say that the Vedas say that you should not worship any idols and all that. They don't do it in practice, but in the original Vedas, it is there because those Brahmins who came, the Aryans who came at that time, knew the concept in the Torah that there is one God and thou shalt not make any images of them. And that was also passed on to the Brahmins, basically. The gods abode on the water. Remember the first Genesis, it always mentions that in the beginning, there was nothing, everything was void, and God's spirit lay over the water. That concept, they literally took it, and that is the concept of, you see, their gods, Vishnu sitting over the water, Brahma sleeping over the water. That pose basically is taken from Buddhism, but the concept that God is abode on the water is also taken from there. The other thing which they say that God created, we say in the Bible it is written, God created us with the word. Basically, he spoke the word and man was created. This confusion in mythology in the Brahmins, they say that the Brahmins was created by the mouth and the Shudras were created from the leg of God. They jumbled up a lot of stuff, but the main concept comes from here. When they say that the Brahmins were created by his mouth, it's the same thing what the Bible says, that the creation was with the word. Like I said here, the seven sages in Sumerian history, the seven sages of Sumer, this was in 4500 to 1900 BCE. These were the seven sages. Now, Enki, Enlil, Ninruta was basically the moon god. Nabu, Utu, Inanna is nothing but Athena. Damuzu is Tammuz, and Gilgamesh. This is the seven sages which the Sumerians had. And this is a picture of the Ganga river. Today we don't have the Saraswati. Saraswati river was never found. We don't have it in modern day also. Archaeologists couldn't find it. They say it dried up. But the Ganga river is still there. The Ganga river is known as the Ganga Hakra river. It is still there. It was in memory of Hagar. This is a picture of the Gagar River flowing through Chandigarh. You see on the right side. I just gave it for your information. This is the Talmud and how the Jews put the hair on one side. This was basically copied by the Brahmins, the Aryans who came first. They put it between their head, and that's what you have the chutti. They call it the sikka, and the Jews, I think, they call it with some name. I'm forgetting that name. Okay, here I don't have to go through this one. This is the gods that they created, the different type of Lakshmis and all that. The migrating new Aryans also brought with them the old Mesopotamian and Syrian gods like Baal, Ashura, Dagon, the Dagon fish god, which is known as Agastya. If you know and seen a real statue of Agastya in India, you will see that Agastya has a fish tail. Most of the pictures don't show it, but in southern India, if you go and see Agastya's statue, you'll see that Agastya has a tail. Now, that is nothing but the fish god called Dagon. Dagon was a god with a fish tail and a fish head. This was worshipped in Mesopotamia. And today, the Pope in the Vatican also, if you see very surprisingly, the hat which the Pope wears is actually the shape of Dagon. If you're curious, just go and look at it. Ashura is an old Jewish god. Basically, in the starting, they believed that God had a wife, a consort, and her name was Asherah. This was an old god. Baal, like I said, was the god of sacrifice. And today, Baal is worshipped in India in many forms. Today, the word Bali, Bali is for sacrifice in Hindi. They say Bali, Nar Bali. The word Bali also actually comes from Baal. The human sacrifice comes from Baal. And the practice of Nar Bali was practiced in India till the British came in and the British banned it. If I get time, once I may make a presentation of Nar Bali. It's a very interesting subject. It was practiced till the British came, and when they abolished sati, they also abolished Nar Bali. And it's a very cruel practice. One's hair will stand on their hands if you hear the story of how a person was prepared for the sacrifice. It's a very horrible story. Means practice, it was a horrible story. There was another god called Mot, which was called the god of death. This god later on became, in Zoroastrians, has Hama, and Yama in Hindu as the god of death. That's the reason today for death we call it moth. Remember the Hindi word moth, iska moth hua. Basically, it comes from the Mesopotamian god Mot, was the god of death and the inspiration for Yama and Hama in Zoroastrians and Hindus. Here I mentioned the word death in India, moth comes from the god death, moth. Like I mentioned here, the ancient Israelites did not have a caste society, but they did divide it into different, like there were many tribes, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad. They were all the tribes, the 12 tribes of this. They were distributed into various different types, basically, with clear roles for men and women, landowners and laborers, the wealthy and the poor. You see how Jews basically divided. Today, Jews may not do it, but the ancient Jews did it. And this is there in Deuteronomy. They basically had that same principle and that same logic when they came into the new land of India. The priests were known as Kohanims. The priest also, there were two classes of priests. You have the Kohanims and the Levinims. That means only the high priest can go into the tabernacle to worship God. The other priests were allowed only sacrifices. So they had classes between priests also. The regular Israelites were known with this name. Priests born out of illegitimate unions, that means one priest and one this, they were known as charalims. This word is also used in Brahmins, they call it chandals. If a Brahmin has a child from a Shudra, he is called a Chandal. You must have heard that word Chandali, Chandale. Chandal means illegitimate. It takes 7 generations for him to become a Brahmin again, as per the Manusmriti. If a Brahmin has an illegitimate child, today the Nayars are called that. In the Nayars of Kerala were actually, as per the RSS chief, once he gave a statement, that the Nayars of Kerala were basically very, what do you call it, uh, down class people. So they had to bring Brahmins into India so that the class of people, they bring up the class of people there if they mix with the Brahmins. And those children born under the Brahmins' unions with the Shudras were called the Nayars, basically. That's a very old statement now. So you have different converts were known as Garims, liberated slaves were known as Charumins. So they had a different set of people. Temple slaves were known as different. The people who did not know the identity of their fathers were called so and so and so and so. So you see how the Jews split up people. Today, many people think that the Jews are very sacred like the Christians, but no, they had a very egoistic and very broken society at that time. I would say they have taken the word of God and misused it by saying that we are God's own chosen people. I don't believe they are God's own chosen people. No one is God's own chosen people. God has created the meek, the strong, the powerful, everyone in his own image. God never said Jews are his chosen people. That is their way just to keep importance in this world, that they are the chosen people. The same thing the Brahmins did when they came to India. They said they are the chosen people of God, of Brahma. Here is the diagram of the camp of Israel, basically. You see the tabernacle. No one was allowed to enter the tabernacle. They made a lot of stories that you will get burnt inside. I don't believe those. I am sure those are all stories cooked up by the priest so that no one goes there. But they were the people who had the priests who were allowed to worship in the tabernacle were the Levites. But Levites has also had 4 sets of community. The highest was the descendants of Moses and Aaron. They could only enter the inner circle of where God's image appeared. That's the Ark of the Covenant. No one else was allowed to enter the Ark of the Covenant except for the priests of the Levites from Moses and Aaron. It was Aaron's sons who basically were only allowed to enter the inner sanctuary. The other Levites or the priests were given other like sacrifice, cleaning the temple, and all that. So you can get a fair idea how the Brahmins also performed with the same structure in mind. And the outer tents you see, those are the 12 tribes: Naphtali, Benjamin, Manasseh. Manasseh was one of the group which reached India, and they escaped during the first temple destruction. And they are, I think, what do you call it, Manipur or I think I'm not getting it right now, but they came to northern India. I think it is Manipur or somewhere. Those Christians, Jews there are basically the tribe of Manasseh. You see Gad, Simeon, Reuben, Zebullah. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I want to get into the early Vedas, which they say the Vedas are basically written by the Brahmins who came in. Now, the Vedas, the gods in the Vedas are not worshipped today. The original gods of the Vedas were the Vayu, water, fire, Agni. Then you have Indra, and I think one more is there. Here it is. These are the gods in the Vedas: Brahma, Vayu, Agni, Mitra, Indara, Rudra, Soma, Narayan, and Naranarayan. These are the gods mentioned in the Vedas. Basically, none of this is worshipped today. All the later on gods which came under the subject of Hinduism, and that I will cover in my next chapter because I have to put that into a second chapter. It is too long. This I'm just talking of the Brahmins. These gods were worshipped later and came into existing after the 8th to the 15th century. And I'm telling this with great pride and with a lot of research done. Many of my Hindu friends will tell this, Hinduism was there a very long time. No, it started from the 8th century. There is no temple in India before the 5th century. If you find it, it was not a temple, it was a Buddhist shrine. No temple in India is there before the 5th century. This is a statement even done by some of the archaeological is of India too. Many of the temples today, which are there, famous ones, are all built in the 11th and 12th century. 8th century to 11th, 12th century. Some are even built in the 15th, 16th. The Sun Temple was itself built in the 14th century. These gods all came later on: Ganesha, Hanuman, Shiva, Krishna, Durga, and Kali. And I'll go with the details of how these gods came in my next presentation. The Lord of beginning from Buddha as Vinayaka, the elephant Buddha. Hanuman's basically inspiration came from the monkey god, the center of Ramayana epic, from the Jataka tales and the story of the Monkey King. Shiva is connected basically to the Hindus connected with the Vedic god Rudra, but Rudra has no connection with Shiva. They say that because many people say that Shiva is not in the Vedas. So the Hindus have a counter for that and say that Rudra is Shiva. Rudra is not Shiva. Rudra is a different, what do you call, a Syrian god, basically. It's nothing to do with Shiva. Shiva is basically a story incorporated with various things in mind. One of the is the what do you call, the Kushan kings used to worship a god called Osho and Omo, and I'll show you the gold coins here on the top here. This is from the Kushan kingdom, and this is not Shiva standing; it is Osho and his wife Omo. They are standing with the bull. They always will show Shiva standing with a trident and with the bull standing. Basically, those pictures were later on painted by Raja Ravi Verma of Kerala. He painted most. Today, all Hindus have their gods' pictures because of Raja Ravi Verma. He painted all this by looking at Buddhist statues. Then you have the Krishna, and I will tell you in my next presentation who actually was the inspiration for Krishna. The word Krishna means black. In Sanskrit, it means black. And the word Kri was not there in Pali. Remember very carefully, the Pali was the oldest language, Brahmi was the script, and Sanskrit came later on from Brahmi. So in Pali, the word letter Kha is not there. Krishna was not known, and the inspiration comes from two different things for Krishna. One is when Megasthenes, I told you that Megasthenes, the Greek writer, came to India in the 2nd century BC. He mentions that in the court of Samudragupta, they were worshipping Heracles. Heracles is the Greek god. They were worshipping him as Hera Krishna. The word Hera Krishna, later on, the Hindus converted it to Hare Krishna. But Hera was Heracles. Heracles was worshipped, and I'll show you the proof of Heracles too. Later on, they also took the inspiration from the Jatakatas of Buddhist books. Buddhists also did a lot of copying. It is not that Buddhists did not do copying. Buddhists also copied a lot from Greeks. The lot of inspiration of Buddhist gods, because what Buddha preached and the books written, there was a gap of 500 years. Buddha lived in 500 BC. He died around 480 BC. And the first books, the books of Tripita, the books of Buddhism, were written only in the 2nd century AD. That means 500 years after Buddha died, they wrote the books of Buddha. So by that time, they already incorporated a lot of other things which Buddha never talked about. There were a lot of gods, and later on it became into different religions, different sects, Vajrapani, and from there Hinduism also came out. So Durga and Kali, the prominent gods in the Vedic, basically they also come from Tara Devi. Tara Devi is a Buddhist bodhisattva. And I did explain what is a bodhisattva. There are different categories before you become a Buddha. Buddha is a title. Below that, there is a bodhisattva. So there were many bodhisattvas. These bodhisattvas were later converted into Hindu gods too. Like I've given a brief discussion of from where they have got these gods, and I'll go into details when I go into my second chapter of Hinduism. Yeah, here I talk a little bit about Sri Shankaracharya. He was also the person who started Shivaism. Hinduism is broken into three, into Vishnuism, Shivaism, and Shaktiism. Now, all these three were very separate. They used to fight with each other in the 13th, 14th century. They were behind each other's blood. But later on, after independence and all, everyone considered as one Hinduism, and it gave. Shankaracharya was also called as the Chupaua Buddha. That means the hidden Buddha. He basically got most of his teachings from Buddhist teachers, and later on he became the one to basically start the Hindu religion. He and Ramanacharya, basically started the Vaishnavism. Basically, these two started in the south. So this is what I am just writing here of how they started it, and it went on to become Hindus. The word Sanatan. Today, this word Sanatan is spread. I remember every Hindu talks about Sanatan. Actually, the word Sanatan is a Pali word used by Buddhist scriptures, and it's not a word, it's an adjective. If you know, if we go back to our school days, when we learned what is a word and what is an adjective, we can simply get the difference. Let me give you an example. If I say that I love mangoes, it's a word because mango is it's a particular thing. But if I say I love fruits, then it's an adjective because I'm taking a whole thing at one stretch now. I'm not saying I love mangoes. I love fruits. So it's the whole subject. So that's an adjective. So basically, Sanatan doesn't mean a Hinduism or something. Sanatan means what was there before, what we were preaching before. It derived from the Pali word Sanato. Sanatana, that means Isa Dhamma Sanatana, that means what was before, what was practiced before. This word first appears in the Pali language in the book Dharmapada, basically. This was not a Hindu word. Today, Hindus openly say, my Sanatana here, without even understanding the word, what was Sanatana and who used the word Sanatana. Here, I briefly give you the combination, though I'll go into detail in my next presentation, of Krishna and Heracles. Basically, the stories of Krishna, particularly the early lives, the stories are stolen from many things. The stories you have even the story of Moses in the story of Krishna, where at his birth he is put in a basket and put into the running river. And that story also we all know is of Moses, which came 1500 years back when India doesn't have even the record of the Indus Valley, where Moses' sister puts her in a basket and the Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses. That story is also taken into uh, the Hindu mythology, basically. Many scholars suggest that the stories of Krishna are either interpreted through a Hellenistic lens. Hellenistic means the Greek period, shared common Indo-European mythology. You have Krishna subduing the snake serpent. You know, most of you might have seen a picture of Krishna standing on a eight-headed snake and jumping and killing that snake. Basically, that comes from the story of the Heracles killing the multi-headed snake demon Hydra. In Greek mythology, there's a god with lots of snakes on the head. I'll show you the picture later on. That was the god Hydra. There's a Greek mythology about how she was cursed and all that. That same story was picked up by the Hindus, put it into Krishna's story, and showed that he's killing the multi-head snake called Kaliya by jumping into the Yamuna river. This is one story. The bird demon. Krishna kills Bakasura, a bird demon who tries to swallow him. Similar to the Heracles killing the man-eating Stymphallian bird in the stories of Greek Heracles, he kills the mythological bird, uh, but the Hindus took that story and put it into their stories of Krishna, where he's killing and called it Bakasura. The bull demon, Krishna killed Aristara, Aristasura. Names are a little complicated. A demon in the form of a terrifying bull, echoing Heracles' capture of Cretan bull. The horse demon. Krishna defeats Keshi, a demon in the form of a horse, mirrors Hercules taming the mares of Demerys. Lifting the world. Krishna lifted the Govardhan mountain on his finger to protect villages, which is frequently compared to Heracles carrying the celestial fear on the world. You must have seen that the photograph of Atlas. Atlas is nothing but he's another name for Heracles. Atlas carrying he was later on burdened by carrying the world on his head. That is also copied. The childhood perils, both heroes faced numerous attempts in their lives by powerful enemies during their childhood. Krishna by Kamsa demons and Heracles by serpents and by stepmother Hera. Both figures are often described in traditional literatures as having a dark complexion. Heracles is supposed to be a very dark person. That's why the word Krishna means black. I told you before, what does black and why does his picture show him in blue color? There's no blue, it's black. Rama is shown as black because these were all African gods. The identification of Krishna as Heracles was likely due to the Greek efforts to understand Indian god by using their own mythological equivalents. Megasthenes' account. The Greek ambassador Megasthenes wrote in his lost book Indica that Heracles was held in high regards by Surasena people. Surasena was the people he called in India at that time when he came. Now, there is another thing which I wanted to add to, which is not in this slide, that if any of you have read the Gita or stories of Krishna, there is no mention of Gopi, Radha, the Kurds in the original Gita. All these stories were cooked up later on. There is no Radha in Krishna's story. There is no he running behind girls. There is no breaking of matka. All these stories are not there because the original story, they got it from the Jatakatha when they were writing the Ramayana, basically. Here I wanted to show a picture of Heracles. Krishna, like I said, means dark or black. Quintus, a Roman historian, mentioned that when Alexander confronted Indian king Puru, Puru's soldiers were carrying an image of Heracles, Hera Krishna, in their vanguard. This is what Curtius Quintus wrote. He's a Greek writer, Roman historian. And he mentions that the Puru soldiers were carrying an image of Heracles when they came to war. Megasthenes, like I said, Megasthenes described an Indian tribe called Surasenai, who especially worshipped Heracles in their land. And this land had two cities, Methora and Kelsobara, and a river named the Jobaris. What is Methora is basically modern day Mathura, and Surasena refers to Surasena as a branch of the Yadu dynasty, and Jobaris may be the Yamuna river, which he mentions at that time. Basically, rivers and names had changed a lot. Kilsobara to Krishnapura means the city of Krishna. The city of Krishna means the city of Heracles. Hera was known as Krishna, the dark person. And here below is a Greek statue of Heracles fighting with the, looks like a octopus. But this is how Heracles was shown in Greek mythology. And here is a book which I don't want to go through it. Some of I have taken from the Vedas also. There is a beautiful book called Brahman, the God of Abraham. It was written by N.N. Menon. And if you get the time, read through it. It goes into a lot of details which I cannot go through today. And the Brahmins of India present almost similar scenes of eating hastily in their rituals. Like Hebrews, the Hindu women folk also sit in circles to eat like their shares in their public feasts. Jews also kept their women separate in every occasion. The same is done by the Brahmins. Then you have the Saraswat Brahmins in Goa. They also claim that they are not native to the soil, but arrived here from the banks of the river Saraswati. Now, you remember the Saraswati is not there here today. So what they call Saraswati, we don't know. The Saraswat Brahmins are today in Goa, actually. The actual location, which is a matter of dispute, but the fact remains that the Saraswatis are migrants. Were they original, one of the lost tribes? All these questions may be answered with some diversity of certain through DNA testing. And I showed you an article done by the British University of DNA testing, and that do point us to this. Here I have mentioned some from the Veda. Basically, it clearly mentioned there is no and nothing like him. There's no picture, no icon, no smiles, no metaphor. This is basically the Rig Veda. I've just translated what they have written. He is the golden seed of the universe. It is apparent. No, no, do not kill me. Do not punish. I pray. Such is the prayer of humanity to him. This is, I'm just converting what is written in the Veda. It clearly mentions there is one God and there is no likeness to him. And these are some of it. I don't want to go through it, but if you're interested, I can send you this chart. Okay, here I mentioned the Rishonim. The early ones referred to the leading rabbis as rishis. This word was also copied. A Hindu sage or a saint who sees the truth is a rishi. But in Jewish culture, they were known as the Rishonims. And here I mentioned a little bit article about the Rishonims too. Here, this is just a picture of the Kushites, where Kush in what you call in Assyria. This was a land. This is today. These things exist in Sudan. The Horses of Kush. This is a book, very beautiful book, and this is a real picture. And below you see the Kushites with their bow and arrows. Now the Kushites were very good with bow and arrows. And you see in the early Ramayana and Mahabharata, they show the Indians very skillful people with bow and arrows. Rama comes and wins Sita by taking part in the Swayamvara, where he takes the bow and arrow and uses it, and he is victor over and wins the heart of his wife, Sita. So basically, here we show the Kushites, and they were in India known as the Kastriyas, what we call the fighters, the warrior class. They all come from Kush. Now, this is very, I told you in the start, I wanted to show you from where did the Narmasimha come. Now, in the Kushites had a god. They used to call him Epidemic in Kushite, in Ethiopia. This god influence fell upon India as the god Narasimha, the lion god, as an avatar of Vishnu as per Hinduism. This inspiration also comes from this African god called Epidemic. Epidemic was the war god of the Africans. He's still there. He has 3 heads and he's a lion with a man's body. Here you see Epidemic, how the Kushite war god, you see him. This god was copied as Narasimha in the olden avatars. And this was nothing connected with India. Like I said before, everything was an inspiration and stolen from here, there. Everything was, just brought together. And over the years, it became, people forgot the real source of the information. Here we have the forgotten gods of Namibia. These are the gods. Basically, they were the Nubians also were inspired by the Egyptians. The Egyptians were inspired by the Canaanites. So this thing continued. Here I just show information of how the alphabets which were tally with the Indus Valley. So we don't have to go through that. These are the scripts. And this is my information which I've taken from some of the books. I took it from the Indica. I took the Brahmins information from Jyotiba Phule's book, Dhulamgiri. The stories of Brahma comes from various sources, also from the book of Brahman that is written by Menon. And there's a very interesting book called The Historical Treatise of the Travels of Noah into Europe. It's a very interesting book. Okay, I'm done with my presentation. Once, just give me a minute. I wanted to stop the recording before I